Hi, and welcome to the Active Code podcast, brought to you by Aspire Active Partnerships. I'm Paul Griffiths, and joining me each week on the pod is Luke Johnson.
Aspire Active Partnerships is a community of like-minded business leaders who all believe that collaboration in the sports coaching and children's activity sector is essential for success. We've proven that working in collaboration does benefit business growth and essentially helps more children be more active more often.
To combat physical inactivity, we need organisations that are performing at their very best. Organisations will only operate to high standards if they are led well. So, if we can focus on developing high quality leaders throughout an organisation, not just at the top, customers will experience higher quality services, which means heightened enjoyment levels and increased levels of physical activity. And if we do this at an early age, we know that we can build the foundations for a more active, happier and healthier life. The Active Code investigates what it really takes to be a successful leader and how organisations can combat physical inactivity.
We won't be alone through this journey. We are joined by business owners and experts from our sector, as well as inspirational people from outside our industry. We'll understand the importance of physical activity to our guests, reflect on leadership experiences, and gain thought-provoking insights on how we can crack the Active Code and get more children more active more often. If you like what you hear, please leave us a rating and subscribe wherever you get your pods.
Welcome to the Active Code podcast. Our guest for this episode is Ben Rigby, Managing Director at Sporting Communities. Sporting Communities is an ethical, non-for-profit community interest company who are committed to delivering cost-effective, timely and professional services. During this episode, you'll get to hear how Ben and his team have engaged over 30,000 people in regular physical activity, invested millions into communities, what Ben means by providing activity by stealth, the importance of stepping out of your comfort zone to develop, and how it's vital to go down and talk to those in your local communities to fully understand what motivates them to take part. Enjoy the pod.
Hi Ben, thanks for joining us on the Active Code. Can you start from the beginning, and if you look back on your professional career, where did it all begin?
So when I was growing up, I wanted to be a sports coach. I suppose that sort of stemmed from I've got a love for sport. But also I used to go along and watch Stoke City Football Club, and they would have their coaches go out and get the players to go and do a few laps of the pitch and a bit of stretching. And I always thought I could do a better job than that. So it sort of inspired me to go down this route of coaching. So whilst I was at college and at school, I coached with the Stoke City ladies team. I did some work for Newcastle Borough Council as well, coaching in the community, which I actually enjoyed probably more than the sport for sport coaching. And then when it came to the end of my education and I went into higher education, I sort of took a year out because I thought, well, I didn't want to go to university. I didn't see any point really at wanting to become a coach because the qualifications were more around NGB qualifications if you wanted to sort of progress in the field, and I thought it was a bit of a waste of time going to university. But someone had mentioned to us in their school speech that if you weren't sure, just defer a year. So I went and did some quite challenging jobs. I worked for Twyford throwing toilets down a chute. I worked at a computer place cleaning equipment, and I worked on a vineyard, which is the only job that I would never do again. And that sort of like just reminded me about how important my education was, but just also gave us that breather to be able to focus again. So I went back to university and I'd chosen one of the courses, the few courses around at the time that had got coaching in the title, which was sports coaching and development. And actually, I really liked coaching and sport development. And I actually really fell in love with the sport development side instead. I wanted to impact as many people as possible. And I realized that as a coach, I could impact those, say, 30 people that I was engaging with at the time. But as a sport development worker, I could influence a team of coaches that would then be able to go and impact their 30 each, and all of a sudden that 30 could be 300 or 3,000. And so that's what drove me down this route. I wanted to sort of pass on my knowledge through other people. So I was in a relationship with someone from France at the time. So I went and worked in France on some of the Euro camps. This is post-university, whilst I was sort of studying as well. I did the Erasmus program. And then when we'd finished and I went on to do my master's, because there's obviously a lot of time I was sort of to and fro in between the countries. And then I moved to Surrey before that relationship broke down. And I was working in one of the FE colleges down there, Brooklands, which was brilliant. And I did a lot of the after school and the during school programs and like enrichment activities. And we essentially went from having no enrichment activities at all to re-establishing a couple of football clubs. We had dance programs, we had fitness activities. The guys that were on that was overseeing the physical fitness for the I'm trying to remember what the course was called now. If they wanted to go into the army or the police, then they had like this massive, amazing sort of climbing go ape style piece of equipment, and we used to get other young people from the different programs to come and have a go on that as well. So it was all about just sort of broadening people's experience of physical activity. And also getting the teachers on board as well, because there was a real disconnect between enrichment activities and the teachers. And we actually managed to sort of get teachers to think, oh yeah, actually physical activity is good. So we got them to do some of those same activities, and then they would equally promote it to their peers. So if there was like a beauty therapy course that was on, and we got the teacher that was doing the climbing wall, and enjoyed it, then all of a sudden they'd encourage their students to go and do it. And that sort of then stand into like me really definitely wanting to go down that route. So after that, I went to Derby and I worked for a charity over there where we were working with predominantly disadvantaged young people and sort of disconnected communities. And I worked from when I came into the organisation, I think we were engaging with about a couple hundred people a year. That changed by the end of the sort of 2 years that I was there we were engaging with over 1,000 young people each year through the programs, which was great. But then there was I left that job and wanted to sort of start something up myself. So I went to someone who I respected and knew from actually my work experience days within the local authority, like when I went and worked in the local authority, and I ended up setting up Sporting Communities as a like a community development organisation where we were using sport as a conduit to change people's behaviour and support young people into just having broader horizons and better life chances. As the organisation developed, we understood that we sort of like analysed the organisation and recognised that there was different themes to some of the things that we were doing. And so we basically broke the organisation into 4 parts, which is the sporting communities side. So that's sport for a tool and a little bit of sport for sport's sake. Then we have creative communities, because not everyone likes sports. So that includes play, so like a lot of physical mobility and literacy. And then also we have an events team in there, and they do creative arts, etc. Then we have a supporting communities a sustaining communities team that does training and development and business development, and a supporting communities team which focuses on mental health, wellbeing, family support. And it all creates this sort of holistic model to engaging with people. And just if we go and engage someone through sport, it's like a non-intrusive way of working and forming that relationship. But then from that, we'll talk to them about, how are things going at home? How are things going in school? And if they come to us and say, well, actually, I'm having some problems with parents, or, I'm struggling at school, then we can internally signpost them to a mentor to support them, or a family support worker, or it might be that we put them on a vocational training program, and all with the idea of just giving them that opportunity to sort of succeed. We also work with a lot of partners as well, so signposting is a key part of that. But having that internal option to sort of internally signpost just means that if you formed a relationship with someone and then say, oh, to work on the challenges that you've got, we're going to send you to someone else, quite often that's a barrier. Whereas if we can do that internally, then it creates like a hand holding into those support services. So that's how it sort of came about. And then not long ago, I was working with Simspur and got my Chartered Fellow status as well, which was great. So that's sort of where I'm at now, trying to sort of change the world one day at a time.
Great stuff. No, really, really nice to share that journey with us, Evan, and congratulations on that recent Simspur fellowship. If you just from a sporting communities perspective, is it a local, like regional presence, or have you got a national presence?
It's kind of a bit of both, really. So the initial vision is, and which we still have, is that sporting communities will one day be a completely national organisation and sort of recognised across the country. The way that it works in practice at the minute is that we have a lot of direct delivery in Stoke, Staffordshire, Derby, Derbyshire, but then our business outlook and our virtual programs support organisations from across the country. So we have organisations in Bristol, in Kent that we support. So there's, depending on which sort of strand it is, that depends on the wider remit, or sort of wider geographical remit. But we do plan in time to broaden out. What we always said is that there's always enough need out there and not enough services, especially when it comes to sort of the social fields. So if we are ever going into a new area, we always ensure that we understand what the landscape is and try and identify what the needs are before we go in. We're there to support rather than to tread on other people's toes. And we really do actively believe in partnership working, because we're stronger we're stronger together when we're trying to support people.
And Ben, have you found any struggles when you are trying to reach out further and further across the UK?
Yeah, so one of the things that we said when we set up was that whenever we branched into a new area, we didn't want to lose out on quality, because it's quite easy to spread yourself thin. So quite often, so places like Nottingham and Cheshire at the minute have been asking for us to branch into those areas, but just from a capacity issue, we've sort of held back from doing that, which is a shame, because obviously our goal is to go into those areas, but we've just not wanted to spread ourselves too thin on that, and so that's a challenge. But also, it's getting the whole sector, or certainly the third sector, has been at a struggle for some time since austerity. Back, well, it seems like an eternity ago now, and a lot of organisations, understandably, internalised. And they've got people that they need to support. They've got people that they need to pay to be able to do those things. And so, personally, I feel like the partnership approach got distorted. And we have gone into areas where people have said, well, why should we work with you? You're a competitor. And actually, that's not what it's about. It's about trying to identify together where there's gaps. There might be services that you can enhance of ours, or we can enhance of yours. There's learning to share, or it might be geographical areas that are different. So being able to get people to understand that we're not a threat, that we're not there to sort of take their work, or actually we're there to try and hopefully bring in more funding for the locality, that means that they will also benefit from it. That can be probably one of the biggest challenges. And there's also obviously local authorities at the minute are sort of getting back to their feet as well. So once they've sort of become more stable, again, I think that will help.
And how many people would you say you've engaged over the 10 years?
So over the 10 years that we've been going, we've engaged with over 30,000 different people. That's not inclusive of any of the events that we've done. So when we host an event, we don't count the numbers towards that. So these are people who've like either regularly engaged in the programs or turned up. If we included the events that we've worked out, we could and that we've run, we could probably add another 50% onto that. And over the 10 years that we've been going, we've also been able to invest 2.2 million into community services as well. So whenever we get funding and we're able to sort of pass that down into supporting communities, that's sort of what it's equated to now. And it is the numbers and the investments that we've been able to provide are growing year on year as the organisation grows as well. Those first few years, I mean, our turnover in the first year was about 9,000. So it was, practically nothing. Whereas obviously it's grown considerably since then, and that's great because it means that we can obviously do more and reach more people.
That's really absolutely amazing. Taking it back to you then, Ben. What does physical activity mean to you personally?
So for me, physical activity is about having fun, and it doesn't matter what sort of physical activity it is. It could be that it's play. I truly believe that play is the fundamentals for everything, and whether it be social or whatever, like play is just so key to it. And so that's for me what like physical activity is about. It's about whether you're playing, whether you're going for a run to just sort of get a bit of stress relief, whether it's about working together in a team to compete against another group. It's all about having fun, and if you're not having fun, then I don't think people would be doing it. I know that there's a lot of research that says that the reasons behind people getting physically active are things like for health or for to be part of a social group or whatever. But I think fundamentally all of that links back to them enjoying it. None of us. Well, I say none of us do things that we don't enjoy. I know a lot of us have to wash pots and the rest. So, but it is about having that fun side to it. And I think that if you lose that within sport, it's a real shame then, or physical activity, because all of us it feels like almost like a chore then to do those things. Having fun whilst you're being physically active, I think, is the key to having an active nation.
Absolutely. And what do you do at the moment to keep active?
Well, not enough is the main answer to that. So at the minute, we've got 2 young children, and so I do a lot of play with them, and I try and keep that very physical. They're both wild, so they like to be outside and they like to be playing. So we do a lot of like gardening and jumping around on the gym equipment and things like that. My sport is actually hockey, but I played that for a couple of years now because of injuries. I tended to get to the point where I was injured but played through, as I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, and then it comes back and and bites you on the backside. So I had to take a bit of time out, and COVID sort of fell at a good time for that. To not that COVID was a good thing, but just gave us time to have that break from sport that my body needed. But then going back into it, my first game back, I took a blow to the elbow, and that put me out for 6 weeks. And I just realised that it wasn't something that at this point in my life I could commit to when I was getting injured all the time. So I've been trying to do a lot more gym and swim when I can. We've got a dog, so we go on walks, and we've just bought some bikes. So I try and sort of get out and do as much as I can. But those obviously those activities, other than playing with the children, are like solo activities on the whole. And I am much more of a team sports person. So I do want to get back into some sort of social sport. Whether that be something like badminton, where we can play doubles or something. I haven't quite worked out yet, but yeah, I love the I love the social side of sport. I love to have the banter and that. So
It sounds like, Ben, you've got an active lifestyle, because with 2 young children and a dog, you've got no choice.
yeah, I mean,
The competitive side of things a little bit.
sorry, say that again.
Sounds like you missed the competitive element of sport.
I do miss the competitive elements of sport. I think that for me, there's two types of there's two sort of levels of competition for me. I either know that I'm going into it and it's just to enjoy it, and win or lose, I'll be competitive, and that's great. And like I say, sport and physical activity for me is fun. So if I'm going into something to win, like, I still go and enjoy it. But if I am going in it to win it, then I do get overly competitive at times. And certainly that was something that also I think impacted on my decision to sort of semi-retire from hockey, is that the sort of anger and frustration that I was showing, that was where all my sort of emotions came out on the pitch when I was when something didn't quite go right, or if a decision felt unjust. And I don't think that showing in my position, showing those sort of emotions in front of the public was probably the the greatest thing. So yeah, I mean, I do love the competition, and I think it's just about it's about being able to do something and it not feel like it's leisurely. Like if you're playing a sport or something like some sort of game or competition, then I think being able to sort of like push yourself, like challenge yourself, that's something that's quite exciting. And be able to see whether you can beat the next person. We've got a colleague at our work, and he's absolutely brilliant at any sport. It doesn't matter if he's not picked up a racket or a ball or whatever it is that before. He's just great at them, and that's something that's like a good challenge for myself. Like going, all right, okay, let's see if we can beat him at this sport, because hopefully one of them one day I will do. So yeah,
it's annoying, isn't it, when you get someone that is just great at anything they do and they've not done it for years.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. Yeah. And I don't know whether that stems back to like I used to sprint a lot, so that was my, like, when I was younger, like that was my thing. And when I was sprinting, I was very competitive. I had GB trials, and I think that if I'd have kept with it, I think sky was the limit, really. But these long distance runners, they do take a long time to run, so waiting around for them sort of put me off as a youngster. But I think a lot of that sort of competitive side stems from that.
And given your active background, Ben, and the work that you now do with sporting communities, there's clearly an issue at the moment with inactivity, and we need to get more people more active. So how do we promote physical activity to those that aren't engaged with sport?
Yeah, so I think that there's I think one of the things we need to do is actually go down and talk to the people that are inactive. I think that there's too many times when programs are put on for communities or for groups without that conversation, and not just like a single conversation. It needs to be ongoing. They need to be involved in the process. But for me, having that fun side, having that social side is something that drives people forward a lot. And I've done a lot of work with like friends and communities that are inactive, and having that connection and having that chance to sort of enjoy something without judgment is what keeps them involved. If it was, I'd remembered when I was going through university and we were still talking about inactivity at the same sort of levels as we are now, then I just wondered why we didn't invest in like community buddies or something like that, where they could sit, one person is responsible for 30 inactive people, and their job is to try and get those people active, and that's it. Because once you've got that sort of like one driver, when you might have had the same experience. My friend and I used to go boxing, and he's quite active as well. But when we would walk there, both of us would get there and say, "Oh, do you know, I didn't fancy coming today, but I didn't want to let you down." And so it was. We wanted to go and socialise with each other. We wanted to go and have fun with each other, and it was always amazing when we got there. But just that sort of feeling like, oh, we've got to go and now be drilled for an hour, do something that was really hard work. That was enough to sort of like, it had to be something more to get us to want to go. And I think that having that sort of buddy system, or, it might not necessarily be called that, but that having someone who can motivate you to go and keep being retained in sports, I think could be something that would really benefit. We always hear about like inspirational people and, who've helped, and you'll know from some of your network that there's some absolutely amazing people out there that, the participants, the engaging audience, they go because they want to connect with that person. They want to go and have fun with that person. So I think that having more of that would definitely help. One of the things that we also do is we try and do sort of activity by stealth as well. So when we work with like either our older people in sort of homes, or if we go and support young people on the streets who are on the periphery of some of the engagement that we do, we try and do a lot of sort of activity by stealth. So just asking them to come and help out with something, or spend time chatting with them, and then get them to do something that's a little bit physically active. So as it encourages them it just becomes part of their norm, part of their process. And then after a short while, you don't need to ask them to get involved. They just do it. So that's something that we've found has sort of worked quite well as well.
Yeah, it's something that's often overlooked, I think, isn't it, with regards to actually asking people or asking the communities where programs are being delivered, or there's a need for a program, actually asking them what they want and what they need, and not just assuming as an organisation or as a group of people that what's best for them and what program will work for them, because based on previous experience of this program working in X location, we assume it will work in this location or with these people. So I think it's crucial that we're communicating and engaging people with like-minded people to make sure that we do have that impact.
Yeah, and it's incredible how much censorship we've had as a society, and that sort of stems through to activity as well. We have it in our political fields, and that we're almost encouraged not to speak out. And certainly through social media now, it makes it even more challenging, because people say things on a social platform where they feel like they're safe, and some of those things aren't necessarily helpful, but also we don't have enough. There's not enough times where people feel heard as well, so it just shuts people down from talking. And I think it's not much better, and it's much more effective if we can actually reach in and have ongoing dialogue with the people that we're trying to support.
Yeah, absolutely. And even to a point, I know some organisations that may then try and get those people that they have engaged, and it's worked with them, get them kind of re-engaged to try and engage more people through the programs that organisations run. Obviously a decade now that you've been running Sporting Communities. What's your proudest achievement to date, Ben?
Oh, crikey, that's a hard one. I think the first. I think just within the team, we have so many amazing workers that are all working off of the same philosophy, that I have them on a quite regular basis. Actually, seeing the team sort of strive to something together, with this sort of same philosophy that we have. So our motto is working with communities to learn how to serve them best. And we really do believe in that. It's about listening to them and working out what they need, rather than, like we just talked about, imposing something on them. And seeing the team come together on an almost daily basis and actually sort of address a solution. Like I remember remember a couple of years ago we were working towards. Sorry, can I scrap that?
Yeah.
I I do like the team on a daily basis is definitely something like they're just incredible workers. So I feel like immensely proud of them like all the time. If it's sort of like to narrow it down to like one moment, one of the things that I really felt proud of was when we held our first Derby City Youth Awards. And so that was off of the back of some young people who, well, I say young people, a lot of young people who sort of essentially said, what's the point in sort of trying harder or being good because we never get any recognition for it. So the team came together and they came up with some ideas and proposed it back to the young people, and they agreed on creating the Derby City Youth Awards, which were the first of its kind. So with that, we basically hold an annual celebration event of young people, and just seeing the team come together to actually turn this thing into a reality, and gather partners on board who could really see what it was about and shout out about young people, and then seeing some of the young people up there who had gone through horrendous things, who had done incredible things, who'd been creative and innovative, come out and tell their story and get a recognition for it. That was a proud moment. That's obviously gone on now. We're going to be running our fourth one this year in Derby, and we've now got one in Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent as well. We're going to be holding the second one this year. So it's great. Going along to those events reminds you each year of like the pinnacle of why you're doing these things. Like we see on our social media, we have a social media WhatsApp group, and the coaches send through loads and loads of pictures of the work that they're doing. And last night they'd sent one through and said, "Oh, it's we're working hard trying to get the consent forms filled out, but there was about 10 different languages of the young people that we were working with, and so it's quite challenging to do that." But the fact that they were still sort of striving for it and still working and engaging those people in physical activity, I thought was amazing. But then being able to see at the Youth Awards who the sort of like the outstanding people from those groups are, I know it just like it hits a chord then.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's a really nice achievement. I think you said there about recognition and how young people in particular, especially given what's gone on the last couple of years, I think it's probably nothing more important than for them to be recognised and with their achievements, because it's a big motivational factor, I guess, to help them kind of push forwards, whether that be down a career path or engaging them in activity and making them more healthy. So no, that's nice. And there's
We see
10 years as MD, Ben, as well as of Sporting Communities. Anyone in any position when you're leading an organisation has headaches. So what gives you headaches at the moment?
Well, lack of sleep gives me headaches as well. Like I said, we've got 2 young children, that doesn't help. I think the thing for me is at the minute the hardest things being in. This is I imagine this is similar for a lot of organisations, but I'm a little bit financially risk averse, which makes sure that we've obviously got enough money to pay everyone, and we always stay well balanced. But I'm not so good at speculating for things, which is something that I'm having to learn as a leader to change. But what that means is then that we've not invested in like a marketing officer, an administrator. We've never had an administrator. We've just invested into a finance officer for the first time. So being able to run the programs and the volume of programs that we're working at the minute without those sorts of what you would class as sort of key roles has been hard work. And so, I mean, you can tell when I've had to put a post on social media because it isn't anywhere near as good as as it could be. So yeah, that's something that sort of gives us a headache, having to switch from planning out some sort of strategic vision for a program for the next 5 years, and then trying to write a post on Twitter, and then sort out a policy that needs amending, and then try and work out someone's expenses. Just having that, the sheer volume of roles that we've needed to sort of incorporate into one, that's something that's been a challenge. And obviously, as MD now, having the volume of staff that we've got, one of the other headaches is making sure that we keep those people in posts. Like, our retention rate is fantastic. We have a linear management system. We all had those jobs where we feel like the bosses felt like they've had ownership of you, or they've not necessarily treated you with the respect that you should have. And we wanted to have a linear management system so that people could feel like we were they could come to us and talk to us, or share their thoughts, and we encourage innovation and creativity. But keeping those people on board then obviously means that rather than having a couple of workers at 20, 30 grand a year, or 40 grand, or whatever it is, to then having, I think we've got 15 on the books at the minute. It's obviously a lot more money that you need to find each year. So we want to keep everyone that we've got. They're an amazing group of people, and without them, we wouldn't be having the impact that we're having. So that's one of the other headaches that we have at the minute, is making sure that we keep the money coming in for them.
And have any of the things that you've instilled at Sporting Communities come from leaders that you've worked with in the past?
Yeah, so our philosophy and our code of ethics came from our chief exec. So he's sort of, I suppose, like my inspiration. It's someone that I've known for a very long time, as a family friend as well. And he took us on board for work experience. And I just loved seeing everything that they did within the community green space team that they got. So they were responsible for all the parks and leisure services in Stoke-on-Trent. But they also ran a lot of school programs and things like that. And I remember doing things like painting murals and going and doing like a music program with them. Just there was so many things that team did, and all of them that had this incredible benefit. But what flowed through his approach was this commitment to humanity, and this philosophy about making sure that we did things right by people, and that we treated people fairly and with respect and with dignity. And so that was something that really sort of stuck with me. And it has, when we started Sporting Communities up, we have had challenges where, because of sticking to those ethics, we've not worked with people, or we've turned down work because we'll only work with groups that are also ethical. And there have been occasions where partners have maybe not fit that criteria, or other organisations, I should say, and then we've not worked with them, or they've mentioned things and we challenge that. And I think that's another thing that makes our approach, I suppose, more of a challenge. And this is something that he's also encouraged us to do, is we don't play the game to a certain degree. If we believe something, then we will talk about it. If we think something is right, then we'll talk about it. And we're open to listen. We're always open to listening, but we won't keep quiet because that might mean that we'll get somewhere, or that we'll become friends with someone. We're here to do a job. We're here to make people's lives better, and that's first and foremost for us. So he's probably been my most inspirational leader. But one of the other people that I've taken a lot from, because when I had a look at this question, I actually realized that I don't necessarily have many inspirational leaders. I feel like I've sort of picked up good and bad points off of leaders that I've worked with in the past, and probably focus more on the things that I don't want to be as a leader. But Jane Ashworth is someone else that I took a lot from. And I remember going along to a lot of meetings with her early doors, and the way that she commanded the room was great. The way that she listened to people was brilliant. But she always said, I remember saying, doesn't matter how we go about getting the support. We just need to get the support in to help people. And I think part of that is around making sure that we find funding and find partners wherever we can to enhance the services that are available to young people and to communities. So she's someone that I took a lot from. And the way that she sort of connected people as well. Didn't matter when I was first starting up at Sporting Communities. She didn't mind just introducing me to like Phil Smith at Sport England. Even though I was a small fry in this VCSE world, like it was just, yeah, you're someone who wants to speak to someone else. So yeah, I can facilitate that, and I respected that a lot.
And the work you do with Sporting Communities, you've already mentioned about developing people, in essence, the customers, I guess. What importance do you place on developing people within your organisation, in particular with regards to leadership, Ben?
Yeah, so we feel like it's really important to have leaders that sort of follow the same morals and philosophy as we do, and we sort of instill that within the organisation from people when they first come on board. So whether they're a casual community coach or whether they are one of our community development managers, that sort of flows through them. And the way that they approach either participants or other workers, we feel is vital. A lot of our workers have actually progressed through the organisation rather than as bringing in new people. So, for example, our supporting community development manager is someone that I worked with as a participant in my previous job. So he was someone who'd had, I suppose, a challenging upbringing, and came on board. I got him into volunteering. I took him on as a coach. He wanted to, he had a lot of drive and passion, and became a development officer. And we worked because he wanted to become a manager. We worked with him and on how he could improve his leadership skills, put him on some CPD, and then now he's our community development manager. So we really believe in developing people. One of the things that we also do as part of so when we have our staff appraisals, they're not appraisals about performance. They're appraisals predominantly about where they see their future and what sort of things that they would like to do. And through that, we've had a number of people within the organisation change roles. So, for example, our Staffordshire Development Officer had said, actually, do you know what? The community development side of things interests me. But actually what really interests me is understanding insight and monitoring evaluation. So he became our insight and evaluation officer instead, and does all our reports, and he finds out about what makes a community tick, and then helps our officers to be able to put the things in place to better serve that community. So I think as we do try and encourage leaders to sort of listen to the workers that we've got and make them feel valued and respected. We said before about with the young people, making sure that they get recognition for what they do, and I think that's the same with workers as well. None of us do this because we want a pat on the back, but sometimes a pat on the back goes a long way, and just being able to hear the words "you've done a great job," it does resonate with people, and we try and instill that in the workers to value and our leaders to value the people that are sort of working for them.
And from leadership within your organisation to leadership in the sector, what are your views on it at present?
So for me at the minute, leadership in the sectors, it's changing, and I think that it's almost become a little bit disproportionate. So we've got a lot of local leaders that are struggling to make ends meet. And it reminds me of when we first set up, that we were leading but also delivering on a lot of the programs. So what ended up happening then is that you didn't have time to lead properly, because you were trying to also deliver programs and work out, how to get enough money to pay your own mortgage and whatnot. And it detracts from being able to focus on how you're going to strategically develop as an organization, or as within your workforce, whatever your aims are. So I think that certainly as we've come out of COVID and the cost of living has gone up considerably, that's almost exacerbated. But on the flip side, I think we've got a lot of leaders as well that are trying to maintain their positions and status. So I feel like certainly at a certain level, there's and certainly within the sports sector, there's a lot of leaders that are using their time to capitalize on getting reinvestments. So the focus there being less on what the development needs to be and more on just making sure that their organization sustains. And I think there needs to be a change from that. I think it needs to, the focus should always be on like what the greatest impact is, and not about like just sustaining and building as a team or as an organization. So it's sort of that internal sustainability that becomes the focus, rather than like creativity and developing the sector. One thing that I think is interesting and I think will change is that I know that certainly within the sports sector, Sport England have now got the likes of UK Youth as a system partner. I know they're doing a lot of work with Unlimited, and they are fantastic third sector organisations that really do a lot of work of understanding what community development needs to take place. And within the Uniting the Movement strategy, obviously there's such a big focus on community. It is nice to see that shift, and I think there will be some changes to that, because I know that the leadership within those organisations is very much focused on, how we work as a sector, and that we're stronger together. I think it's interesting when you look at organisations and the wording around the like on their websites or on their annual reports, if they talk about us as a sector and our collective work, then I think that shows what type of leaders they are, rather than me, myself, and I almost. So yeah.
And do you ever look outside of the sector and kind of think, oh, we could probably pinch that idea, or the way they do that, or certain strategies that they use? Are there any other sectors that stand out to you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that we can become a more empathetic sector. I think that we need to, take on some of the things like psychology does, and become more tolerant around the way that we support people and work together as a sector. I put down the IT. So IT sectors often recruit more diversely, and I think there's a massive issue with diversity and recruitment within the sports sector at the minute. So some of the approaches like blind recruitment and different assessments, so practical assessments rather than it being just sit down and chat for a bit. I think that is something that we could take on board. I'm sure that there's things that we could learn from marketing and retail around how we can provide sport in terms of how we can give sport a greater presence. And sport is massive, and physical activity is massively undervalued, and it's massively underfunded. And even when you look at the difference between like sport and the arts through the DCMS, the proportionate amount of funding is, it's just it's not consistent with the return on investment that you get. And that's not to say that we should be taking money away from the arts. That's to say that just the sports sector needs more investment. I was chatting with someone about facility placements recently, and they were saying that they have to sort of weigh up where the best place for a facility to go in, to be placed is. because they don't have the funding to be able to go, well, that community needs one, so they should have one, and that community needs one, so they should have one. And I think that, when we're talking about barriers to sport, and we all know that accessibility is a barrier to sport, and time and cost is a barrier to sport and physical activity. Even things like having those facilities in those places will make a massive difference if people have got access, then, and have not got to travel across town to go to somewhere, then it'll make it a lot easier for them to get involved and actually access those facilities. So I think there's a lot of things that we can learn, and being able to go back and challenge the government about investing more into the sector is something that I don't think we've necessarily done as well as we could have done. I think that's something that we really need to change going forward. The connections that we're having with public health now are great, and but there's those wider return on investment. Like, sport can save a considerable amount of money, and it might just be about someone being brave. When I was doing my masters, I did an investigation into, if we made sport free, or access to sport and physical activity free, then would that outweigh the costs that we pay on inactivity? And what was interesting is that from that dissertation, it wouldn't at present, but there was the number of respondents said that it didn't sort of weigh up. What was interesting was, though, that 98% of respondents said that for their children, that they would do. So even if they said, if sports activities were free in a local leisure centre, I wouldn't go, but I would send my children along. So it might be that we have to be brave and go, well, we're not going to invest in this generation. We're going to invest in the next generation instead, which is a hard thing to say, because it's all around that preventative work, and proving prevention is more of a challenge. But that might be something that we can do, is inspire the next generation, but keep with that inspiration throughout their lifespan instead. So yeah, I know there's been some programs in Birmingham and places like that where they've done free activity in gyms and leisure centres, but for certain groups, which I can only surmise hasn't worked out as well as they had hoped, because otherwise they'd be running more of them. But just having that sort of like investment into things for the future, I think, is something that we should be doing. But we definitely need to be bringing more money into the sector.
Yeah. I'm not sure about the Birmingham pilot and how that finished. Actually, I think it was kind of probably around COVID it came to an end. So it's all gone very quiet on that front. Maybe investigative work on that one, Ben, just to see what happened with that. But I think from what I heard, it attracted the same people that were already using the facilities in the first place, which is always a challenge, not to try and attract the same people, but obviously to keep them great. But yeah, we'll have a look into that one.
There needs to be more to it than just obviously providing it for free for someone, because how do you get someone through? If someone's inactive, there's obviously a reason why they're inactive, and just it's that same thing of going and having a conversation with them. Well, how are we going to change that? There will always be something that would motivate someone to do that. It's about finding out.
Cost could be a barrier, but it may not be the reason why. Who knows? 20 years ago, somebody may have had a really poor experience and it's just put them off. Cost may be a barrier, which should give a few people an opportunity to then participate in activity. But
and if cost is a barrier, cost is obviously a massive barrier, and certainly as poverty goes up considerably. I mean, it'd be interesting to know. I don't know what the current figures are for the cost of inactivity, and it'd be interesting to see whether something like, if you are physically active, then you get a tax break, which equates to your proportion of inactivity. I don't know what that would be. Or
I can sense a PhD coming on here, Ben. I think you're lining yourself up for more research. Because you've got loads of time, haven't you?
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah. Whilst I'm up in the night between 2 and 3 o'clock,
There you go.
I'll write
Easy,
it then.
easy. Right, well, so just to finish off, Ben, if listeners wanted to enhance their leadership skills or their business, if they're running an organisation, what books, podcasts, or people would you recommend that they take some time out to have a look in more detail at?
Yeah, I mean, when you sort of posed this question to me before, I was really unsure because I'm probably not the best person to ask on that because I don't read as much as I should do, and I tend to just use my time to listen to things that I enjoy and that make me laugh because we have so much. We have working within the sector and certainly leading. It's stressful, and you almost need that time to be able to be yourself again, to laugh and just have that release. So, like, I end up listening to podcasts that just make me chuckle, and that just puts me in a better mood, and it takes my mind completely away from work, so that I can come back and be like, all right, okay, that's like I'm ready to focus again now. So I think anything that would give you that sort of release or make you laugh, I would recommend doing. I tend to just watch comedy programs on the telly now because there's enough misery in the world that we can put on when we watch the telly. But
Or no doubt read a load of Julia Donaldson books with the kids.
I think we're keeping her afloat, actually. The amount we've got. That and Bluey. We've got so many Bluey books now.
Yeah, in all seriousness, it's a really nice point to make there, actually, because it's so important, isn't it, that we switch off. So no, that's thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I think if you do find whoever it is that you listen to as a leader, I think if you find someone that really resonates with you, sort of follow that up. And do chase it, and don't be afraid to ask them for advice or speak to them, because good leaders will always be willing to share. But if you don't like the way that someone is leading, then just take note of it as well, and make sure that your leadership then is directed by the things that you've learned from them. So no experience with a leader is a bad one, because even if you pick up something that you think, I ain't never going to do that, then that's a good learning point. But yeah, I'd just say, like, if you find someone that you do enjoy, and you feel like represents you and what you want to aspire to, then go with it.
Absolutely. And what we try and work towards on the podcast, Ben, as you know, is combating physical inactivity. So from everything you've discussed on the pod so far and your experiences, what one thing would you say organisations in our sector need to do to crack the active code and get more people more active more often?
So for me, the key to getting children and people more active is about having more active families. When we go out and work with children in communities or in schools, we're engaging with that group for a couple of hours or even shorter than that sometimes. But actually, then when they go home for the majority of their week, we want them to have an environment which is active as well. So I think having the option to be able to include the families and working with organisations to understand how they can do that better is key for me. I think that if we create active families, then we create happier families and happier lives, but it'll just sustain that engagement. And we need to obviously make that activity like quite person-centered as well. So, not one activity or one game is going to fit all, but if we can get children, and doing something that they love and sort of really champion that, and then create an environment where they can also go home and have that, championed as well, then that, I think, for me would be something that would have a great impact.
Great stuff. Thanks, Ben. Thanks. Really appreciate your time today, Ben. It's been a really good, honest, open insight into the work you have done and continue to do. in the sector. I think clearly your emphasis on developing people within your team to ensure you have a greater impact on those communities really kind of comes to the forefront there. So thank you for your time today. If listeners wish to connect with you, how can they do that?
So they can either go to our website, which is www.sportingcommunitiescic.org, or my email is info@sportingcommunitiescic.org. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn as well, so they can connect with us through that. And if anyone does want to get in touch, obviously feel free to. I'm always happy to talk.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
No, thank you.
Join us next time for the Active Code podcast. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with us on Twitter @aspire_partners and find out more about us and the network at www.aspireactivepartnerships.co.uk.